time was running out. In only 1 week, Balak was leaving this world. No, they were both leaving this world. Magda still didn't realize that she was going with him. In only 1 week, her life would change radically. She had always thought life was a quiet river, a daily routine, working at the farm all day long, then being a waitress at the tavern every evening. She had thought this routine would continue for all of her life. She had never imagined something else. She didn't know anything else. And then she had met Balak, and everything had changed. Her life had taken an unexpected turn. First, she fell in love, something that had never happened to her before. She had a few crushes before, but nothing this strong. She had met Balak's strange blue eyes, and suddenly she couldn't look away. When his sweet lips touched hers, nothing else mattered. Time didn't matter. The world itself didn't matter. And now he was her fiancé. Balak was already an experienced and traveled man. Was she really ready to marry, having a limited set of experiences, growing up with the same routine on an agri-world? She wanted to stay with him, even if it meant following him through the galaxy. She also had to think about the life that she was carrying. Her baby couldn't live without a father. She wouldn't allow that. So why was she afraid? The day after Balak's proposal, she had told Emily and Annalise. Their reaction had been very unexpected. Magda had thought Emily would be happy and Annalise would try to dissuade her, being the most pragmatic of them. But in fact, Annalise had reassured her, telling her that she had to think of her child. Emily, on the other hand, had cried and said that she didn't want her sister to leave, that she was still her little baby, that she couldn't abandon their father and her, and that their mother would be disappointed. She had said that Balak was a good-for-nothing and a scum. That hurt Magda, and she wanted to slap her, but that wouldn't make things better. Instead, Annalise tried to reason with Emily. At the end of the evening, Emily still didn't want Magda to leave, but at least she had agreed to not prevent her from doing it. "You better take care of her," she yelled at Balak after the tavern, pointing an angry finger at him. "You might be at the other end of the galaxy, but I will find you and I will kick your ass." The next big step was telling her father about everything. The wedding, the child, and leaving for unknown space. She already knew the answer, but she had decided it would be better if he just didn't know. Emily could tell him everything after they were gone. But Balak had insisted on meeting him. It had been a mistake. Even with Annalise there to reason, Magda's father refused to hear about a wedding and wanted to lock Magda in her room to prevent her from leaving. It was good that Balak was as imposing as he was, or else he would have been beaten by her father. But Magda didn't allow this failure to get her down. On the contrary, it had actually done the opposite. She felt rebellious. She was old enough to make her own decisions, her own choices. If her father couldn't understand that, then she didn't want anything to do with him. She would marry him whether he liked it or not. She was just sad that her father wouldn't be able to lead her to the altar. Time was flying, and too soon it was the day. It would be a simple wedding, nothing grandiose. It took place in the little church of the town. On Magda's side, only Emily, Annalise, and her husband were invited. Balak had invited Michael, of course, and several soldiers Magda only knew from seeing them at the tavern. Magda didn't have money to buy a dress, but Annalise was a good sewer and had made her one from several pieces of fabric. It was not as beautiful as a real one, but at least it was white. The top had long, flared sleeves hiding her hands and befitted the tradition of Magda's planet. The skirt was long and creased. Annalise had really outdid herself, doing such work in so little time. Magda loved this dress because it was unique. She would keep it for all of her life. Since her father was not there, Emily would be her maid of honor and led her to the altar. She still didn't want Magda to leave, but she knew that she was going to be happy, so she had given her blessings for this union. Before going to the church, she took Magda aside. "Magda, my lovely little sister," she said, sadness in her green eyes. "I still can't believe you're getting married." "Emily," Magda began, sighing. Wait, I'm not here to lecture you, I promise," Emily answered. "You're my little baby. Since our mom's death, I feel responsible for you. Maybe, maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I didn't always help you making the correct choices. I tried, really. But this time, I know you're making a good choice. I don't want you to leave, but I understand, and I know that you have to. It's the right thing to do. And look at you, you're so beautiful in this dress." He smiled, replacing a lock of hair behind Magda's ear. Magda didn't know what to say. "There's something I want to give to you," Emily added. She handed her a small golden ring, devoid of any gemstone. Magda recognized it instantly, even though she had not seen it in a long time. It was her mother's ring. "Oh, Emily, I can't," she begged. "Yes, you can. Mom gave it to me before going. But since you're the first one of us to get married, I think you should have it. Come on, try it out." Magda lifted her left sleeve and put the ring around her ring finger. It fitted perfectly. "See, it's made for you." Emily smiled and took the ring back. "I'll give it to Balak. You'll put it on your finger during the ceremony. That way, you'll always have a souvenir from home." "Thank you so much, Emily. You didn't have to," she said, hugging her sister. "I'm proud of you, Magda," Emily said, starting to cry. Magda also felt a tear on her cheek. This was bad. She couldn't cry now, not before the wedding. "Mom would be proud of you too," Emily continued, sobbing. "I'm sorry for what I said the other day. I was just upset because I'll miss you." "I know," Magda said, a crack in her voice. "I'll miss you too. Every day." "You'll take care of my nephew and niece, won't you?" Emily asked, looking at Magda's face. Magda wiped her tears and nodded with determination. "Good," Emily smiled. "And you'd better write me as often as you can." "Yeah, of course," she answered, even though she didn't even know if that was possible. She hoped so. "Come on, it's time. You don't want to be late for your own wedding." When Magda entered the church, it was crowded. At least 40 heads turned toward her. What was happening? Balak and her had only invited a dozen people. Maybe she was in the wrong church? But then she recognized the faces. People from the farm, former schoolmates, neighbors. What were they all doing here? "My gift," Emily whispered with a grin. Magda smiled. Now it was a perfect wedding. Almost perfect. Only her father was missing. Balak was waiting for her in front of the altar. Balak was in full dress uniform, something Magda had never seen before. He was wearing a long blue velvet frock coat with 2 rows of buttons, silver epaulets, and a silver shoulder cord on the left side. The symbol of the Aquila was sewed on the right side of his chest. He also had a rigid kepi, the same blue color, covering his dark hair. He was standing upright, hands behind his back, smiling to her as if it was the first time he saw her. He offered her his left arm, and Emily let go of her, going to sit in the first row. Magda's eyes were shining as she placed her hand, covered by the sleeve, on his arm. Magda barely listened to the preacher declaiming the emperor's words and blessings. She couldn't take her eyes off Balak's perfect face. She thought about the unexpected turn her life had taken. She realized that she couldn't be happier. She plunged her eyes into Bollock's, and all the fear she had felt vanished. An intense feeling of happiness flew through her body. She was brought back to reality when the preacher asked the fateful question. Bollock Jaden, the preacher said, do you take Magdalene Deschamps as your wedded wife, to live under our emperor's law in the sanctity of marriage? Will you honor, love, and comfort and cherish her from this day forward, forsaking all others, keeping only unto her for as long as you both shall live, as he commands? I do, Bollock answered with a grin. Magda felt her heart rate increase. She didn't know when she had started, but she suddenly realized that she was crying. Magdalene Deschamps, the preacher told her, do you take Bollock Jaden as your wedded husband, to live under our emperor's law in the sanctity of marriage? Will you love, honor, comfort, and cherish him from this day forward, forsaking all others, keeping only unto him for as long as you both shall live, as he commands? That was it, the question that would change her life forever. Only 2 words that would seal her destiny. Bollock smiled at her, a striking smile. He was irresistible. I do, she said, emotion in her voice. Preacher made a sign to Emily to bring the ring. She handed it to Bollock. May the God Emperor bless this ring, so those who give it and those who wear may abide in peace and continue in love under his protection until life's end, the preacher declaimed. Bollock lifted the sleeve of Magda's dress. Magda felt more tears in her cheek as Bollock's long fingers brushed her hand, placing her mother's golden ring around her finger with great care. And that was it. She was married. She smiled widely as this revelation took place in her mind. By the Emperor's will, I pronounce his children, Bollock and Magdalene, husband and wife, the preacher continued. You may now kiss the bride. Bollock seized Magda by the hips, pulling her closer, and leaned in to kiss her. She stood on her tiptoe and put her arms around his neck. She felt a flow of butterflies in her stomach when his lips met hers. It was the gentlest and sweetest kiss that she had ever experienced. She wanted it to last forever, but she was brought back to reality when the guests gave a burst of applause. She had nearly forgotten about them. Bollock noticed and laughed, caressing her cheek. Well, that's it, he said with a grin. You're mine now. The shuttle takeoff had been tumultuous. It was the first time Magda ever left the ground, and she was afraid. She had stayed tensed in her seat, teeth clenched, holding the arms of the seat longer than necessary. Bollock had to pull her off of the seat. Only when she was in his arms, her head against his warm chest, that she began to relax. It's okay, it's over now. Don't worry, I'm here, he whispered, caressing her hair. It took her some time to come around. She realized that her eyes were wet. Around her, the soldiers were already playing cards, smoking, or sleeping like nothing had happened. They must be used to it. I'm ridiculous, she sighed. No, it's always frightening the first time, Bollock reassured her. But it's over. Don't worry. With the gravity generators, you won't feel anything when we leave the atmosphere. Magda couldn't believe that she was flying. Soon she would be in space, lost in an infinite sea of darkness, a new life beginning. She moved toward a window. Bollock tried to prevent her, his eyes interrogative. Let me see, she said. It's the last time I'll ever see my planet. I can't miss this. You won't get sick or something? He asked. Oh, I can't promise anything, she answered. Since she had never left the ground before, she had no idea whether she had a fear of heights or not. Bollock let go of her, and she looked through the thick glass. They were already very high. She couldn't see the houses anymore. The town was only a black spot surrounded by a patchwork of colors created by the fields. She wasn't sick, she was just sad. She would never see her family again. She would never work on the farm anymore. She would never again feel the breeze in her hair, carrying the smell of the crops. She would never again feel the summer sun warming her skin. As the shuttle rose higher in the sky, she could see the first clouds floating lazily under her. She could see the sea, too, but they were too high to recognize the place where Bollock had brought her. She put her hand on the window, and it was cold. "Are you crying?" Bollock asked her, concerned. "No," she answered, turning away. "A new life begins for me now, for us. I'm happy you decided to come with me." He kissed the top of her head. "I know that you've sacrificed a lot." Magda sighed. "Yes, but I've gained a lot too," she answered, touching her stomach. "Don't worry, I'll be okay. Actually, it's kind of fun to see the ground moving away like that. See the fields becoming smaller and smaller." "Really? Then it looks like you're missing the best part." They turned to the window, and as time passed, she could see the planet in its entirety, the patchwork of green and blue moving farther away. She could appreciate the entire planet, until it was just a little dot, a single grain of sand in the universe. As the universe around them expanded, so too did her understanding of the larger universe. "Farewell," she whispered, her breath steaming the glass. "Here we are, girlie," Bollock said with a wide smile, pushing the heavy steel door to their cabin open. "Our new home. You know, there's a tradition on my world. When two people marry, the first time they enter the house, the husband has to carry the wife through the threshold." Magda answered with a mischievous look. Bollock chuckled. "Well, if it's the tradition." He took Magda in his arms and lifted her up easily. She giggled and kissed him on the cheek, enjoying the brushing of his 3 days' stubble against her lips. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," she exclaimed happily. Bollock took a first step forward, and they were inside. The cabin was small, its walls white and naked, its furniture scarce, but at least it was a home. Magda thought that she would have plenty of time to decorate while Bollock was absent. Plenty of time to make it cozy in a comfortable place where they'd be happy to come back, where his wife would be waiting for him. Soldiers with families could have their own cabin aboard the ship, but they had to pay for it. The size of the cabin depended on the size of the family, and, of course, the price. When Magda left the planet, she had taken what she had earned from the tavern, combined with Bollock's pay. They had been able to afford this little cabin. It consisted of a single room and a bathroom. On the right wall of the main room, which acted as a bedroom and a kitchenette, was an alcove where they placed the furniture and a baby's cradle. The bathroom was narrow and inconvenient, and only disposed of a limited amount of hot water, but at least they didn't have to take their shower in the communal bathrooms, with soldiers and workers. And Bollock didn't really care. He was used to it, but Magda was relieved. All in all, it wasn't worse than her former house, though a bit smaller. It was not luxurious, but it was all that they needed. For a simple soldier and his new wife, it was really something. Magda adapted quite well to the life aboard a spaceship. Better than she had thought. Of course, she missed her family and her planet, but at first there was the excitement of the discovery, the new life beginning for her. This environment was so different from her planet, so lively. The spaceship was so vast. It was 2 kilometers long with at least 10 decks, always crowded with soldiers, workers, merchants, crewmen, and etc. Of course, Magda couldn't go everywhere. Some parts were forbidden, guarded by crewmen armed with weapons. Some other parts she had no will to venture. The lowest decks were crowded with indentured workers and even slaves, working and living in the hardest conditions to ensure the smooth functioning of the ship. But since Magda was married to a guard, she was part of the regimental group. That meant that she depended on the Munitorum, not the Imperial Navy. Given that, she had to find a job in the Munitorum. There was always something to do around a regiment of the Imperial Guard. Cooking, cleaning, sewing, waxing, baking. Magda had found a job in the kitchens, peeling potatoes. It wasn't hard, but it was repetitive and tiring, exactly the same as the farm, though she wasn't really disoriented. For 2 months, Balak and her lived happily together, enjoying their new life as a couple. And Balak had introduced Magda to his fellow soldiers. Of course, old Michael, that Magda already knew well, and also some of his other friends. She already had seen most of them at the wedding, but had not been formally introduced yet. Magda thought that they formed a very close team. They had thrown a party to celebrate their wedding with a cake and a lot of alcohol. They laughed all night long, while Michael talked about the past. They all had the same strong accent as Balak and Michael. Magda felt that she was the one talking strangely, which was absurd. That was the first time she missed her planet. Not for long, actually, because she was with Balak, and that was the only thing that mattered. Balak also taught her the organization and hierarchy of the Imperial Guard and its regiment, pointing out officers from a distance. He made a point to tell her to avoid the commissar, if at all possible. He was a strong and harsh man with a red cloak and a chainsword. Magda was not reluctant to follow this advice. She had also made a few acquaintances. One of her colleagues in the kitchen, named Agnes, was a mother. She was also married to a scribe and had 3 children, one of which was 10, 6, and 4 years old. Agnes was at least 10 years older than Magda, and gave her useful advice about her first child. Once, Balak and her had been invited to Agnes's cabin for dinner. They had met her husband and children, all of them very friendly. The sight of this happy family made Magda confident of their future. She knew that she had made the correct choice. During these 2 months, Magda's belly became bigger, though she couldn't feel the baby moving yet. She had less nausea and was less tired, which was good. When Balak was not training, they would often use their free time together to cuddle. But eventually, these 2 months of happiness came to an end. "We will soon be returning to real space," Balak announced to her one evening while they were in bed, sadness in his voice. "In a week, I will go on the front with my regiment." During these past 2 months, they had been traveling through warp space, an extremely treacherous realm beyond reality. The ship's powerful shields protected those inside from the dangers outside. Magda didn't really know how to answer. She didn't want him to leave, of course. She was afraid to be alone in a huge ship, afraid that Balak may miss the birth of his child, and more than everything else, she was afraid that he would die. She felt the tears running down her cheeks as she watched Balak's sad blue eyes. "I can't explain the details of this mission, but I will be back in a few months," he added, sorry to see Magda crying. He took her in his arms and kissed her forehead. "We knew that this was going to happen, but I'll come back. Don't worry," he continued in a soothing voice. "You promise?" she said, a knot in her throat. She buried her head into his muscled chest. "I promise," he smiled slightly. "That's why I asked you to come here with me, that I will always have something to come back to." He wiped Magda's tears with his thumb. Don't cry. I promise I'll come back. The Emperor protects, you know? He chuckled to himself. I told you once, I have a reason to live now. You're my reason to live. You and our kid. He tickled her belly, making her laugh a little. But what if you come back too late, when the baby's already born? Manda asked, anxious. What if you don't come back, she thought, but she refused to say it out loud. We have to agree on a name. That's a good idea. Magda felt that he was anxious. He didn't want to admit it, but he feared death. Magda realized that she had to be strong for him. After all, he was doing the hardest part, going to fight and not even knowing if he would come back. Magda didn't know what kind of horrors he was going to face. What enemy of the Imperium of Man was he going against? She couldn't guess. She knew the Imperium of Man had many enemies, but she didn't know anything about them, and she had the feeling that Balak wouldn't tell her. So she braced herself and dried her tears, thinking of a name of their future baby would at least keep her mind busy for a while. Okay, she said, determination in her voice. What kind of name do you want? A name from your planet or mine? I like both. You choose, Balak answered with a smile. Maybe we could make some suggestions and see if we like anything? Okay, if it's a boy, what do you think about Vasily? Balak suggested. It sounds funny, but that's cute. What do you think about Pierre Olivier? That's a common name on my planet. It's from a saint, I think. Not bad, but it's common? I want something unique for my son, Balak laughed. We don't even know if it's a boy or a girl, Magda said, touching his nose. What if it's a girl? I love the name Angeli. Oh, that's pretty. I like it too, Balak agreed. They spent a majority of the night discussing names, and they decided to sleep on it. The next day, they agreed on 2 names. Pierre Alexander for a boy, and Angeli for a girl. There was only 1 week before Balak's departure, and he had less free time now. He had to train with his unit all day long, and was tired when he came back to the cabin. The days were passing too fast, working all day, spending only a few hours of free time together, and sleeping in each other's arms. Magda grew more and more anxious as the day approached, and her nausea began again. I really won't be able to leave if you're sick, Balak said, his tone concerned. He caressed Magda's forehead with the back of his hand. Try to relax, I'm not gone yet. But I don't want you to go, she complained. You'll have plenty of things to do while I'm gone, he answered. You could try to make this cabin more joyful, for example. You could go to Agnes sometimes. That'd please her, I'm sure. He scratched his chin, and maybe you could find a way to send a message to your sister, but that'd be hard. Magda had not forgotten her family during these 2 months, but she couldn't see how to communicate with them. People aboard the spaceship seemed totally cut off from the world. Only the Guard and the Navy could send and receive messages, but Magda missed her sister. She started to write letters to her, letters which were in her notebook in the cabin, and which would probably stay there forever. I'll try to find a way, she said, without much hope. She touched her belly. You'll miss all the changes, too. Yeah, he said, putting his arms around her hips. But it'll be funny when I come back to see you with a big, round belly. You'll be so changed. Maybe I won't even recognize you. You better recognize me, or you have to sleep with your fellow soldiers, she pouted. Balak burst out laughing. When the day of parting finally came, Magda accompanied Balak to the deck where he would board a shuttle and leave the ship. As his regiment was there, organizing. For the soldiers with family, it was the time for farewells. Magda cried all the tears in her body. Her resolve to be strong was forgotten at that moment. She hugged Balak like it was the last time, which it might be. Maybe it was the last time she could feel his chest against her face, his hot breath in her hair, the sound of his heart pounding, and the smell of his scent. Maybe it was the last time that she would stand on her tiptoes to reach his face, so much higher than hers, to watch his blue eyes, to feel his soft lips against hers. Maybe it was the last time she would feel his strong arms around her, embracing her, clenching her with all of his love, as if he didn't want to let her go. They kissed a lot too, not caring about all the soldiers looking at them. At this moment, nothing mattered except her husband. Behind them, an officer shouted to the troops to gather, and Balak had to leave. "Take care of yourself while I'm gone, and take care of the baby. If you have any problem, go see Agnes, and don't isolate yourself. I'll come back as soon as I can," he said in a hurry. "Promise me you won't die," was all Magda could articulate through her sobs. "I promise you I won't die." His voice seemed so sad, so desperate. That made Magda cry even more. "I'll miss you. You have no idea how much I will miss you," he continued, his lips brushing the hair on top of her head. "I'll miss you too," she sobbed. She wanted to say a million things to him, but she had a lump in her throat. Why now? Why when it was the last time that she could tell these things to him before a potentially long time? Or even the last time? But she refused to think about it now. "You know, I don't say it often, but I love you," he whispered in her ear. He didn't have to say it. Magda knew he loved her with all of his heart. She should be pleased that he said it, but it gave the conversation a definitive aspect. Now it really was the end. Now he had to leave, and he might never return. "I love you too. I love you so much," she cried, clenching Balak's clothes. But he had to go now. He raised her chin and kissed her one last time. She felt all of his love in his arms, but also his fear, the fear to die, to abandon her, the fear of never knowing his child. This kiss scared her more than it comforted her. "Don't go," she continued to cry, wetting his uniform with her tears. He gently removed her hands from his clothing, kissed them, and turned back. Without another sight, he walked to the other soldiers in a resolute way. Magda wanted to watch him, not to miss a single glimpse of her young husband. But she was unable, so she stayed there, her face in her hands, crying and feeling miserable. And soon, Balak was gone. Hey everyone, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the extended format of this video, which is going to be the format for the rest of the series going forward, around 30 minutes each. Please consider liking the video if you enjoyed it. It helps me out a lot. There's a link in the description to all of my socials, as well as our Discord server that we hang out in and play games. But that's everything for today. I really do hope you enjoyed, and good night.